call the appropriations hearing back to order, and want to welcome Chancellor Whitney to here. I've had discussions with her when she was the president of Clarion University and now as interim chancellor of the state system. I want to welcome Lois as well, and to our students. Brian, you go to a great school. Not that I'm partial or anything to IUP, but just maybe a little. And also to the president of Shippensburg University, Dr. Laura Carter. Thank you for coming and being here today. If you would rise, those that are going to provide testimony, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? If so, say I do.
I do.
Thank you. With that, we'll start off with questionings and move through that. Our first questions come from Representative James.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have a lot of questions. I'm only given 5 minutes, but full disclosure, which is a favorite term, I do want the audience to know that I have served as a trustee on one of the boards of one of our system universities for 20 years. So that being said, the best place I can think of to start would be with the National Center for Higher Education Management System report, which was recently received in the system. And I think just getting right down to it, I'm sure the Board of Governors has read it. I wonder if you and the board are working together collaboratively on some of the recommendations in there, and what direction do you think that's taken in conjunction with your three-point plan?
Sure. Yes, sir. Thank you, Representative. I appreciate that question. The NCHEMS report, which I have with me here, I carry with me every day. Probably it's the first thing in the morning. Can you not hear me?
Yeah,
that's what happens when you're short. So, okay, thanks. Is that okay? Not too close? All right. Yes, it's a guiding document. It's actually one of the reasons that report, while I know for some folks it may have been a underwhelming or a surprise or even a disappointment that it didn't have certain things in it, but for me, given the fact that I've been an administrator and leader in higher ed, someone had to remind me yesterday, for almost 40 years, which made me feel old yesterday, but nonetheless, it has some excellent guiding language. And it's one of the reasons why I accepted the post of interim chancellor when I was perfectly happy to have remained at Clarion as president. Because the 9 recommendations, the language, the criticism of us, it provides some of the most elegant language in higher education in terms of what's wrong with us and policy directions that we should seriously consider taking to get what's right. So that's the big picture of how enormous it is. Since receiving that report in July of 2017, we've had numerous retreats, workshops, sessions, both with the board, with our 14 councils of trustees, with the leadership that's here with me today, with the 14 presidents. Most of the 14 presidents are here today to join in on this. And in fact, we were in meetings this morning and we talked about these recommendations. We've gone from system review to what we're calling system redesign, to what I call, and you want to ask, well, what's the point? Where are you leading to? System resilience. So review, redesign toward resilience. And if you go to our website, actually, as I tell people, to the right of my face, if you hit a link called System Redesign, you'll see a whole approach we've taken in which we actualize these 9 recommendations. Because what we weren't going to do is to take the report and then quickly put it on the shelf and forget about it. We've been acting on it every day since that mid-July presentation, and we'll continue to act on it for many years to come. I can give you more specifics if you like, but that's our general approach right now.
Well, if I could drill down to one specific, I'll try to steer your comments.
You betcha.
I have to read a little bit of this. Parts of the strategic review have complaints about everything from salary considerations to program management. I think you are, of all the presidents with whom I am knowledgeable, most uniquely qualified to deal with the following issue. Quote, the real policy document under which the state system is led and managed is the ABSCUF collective bargaining agreement. So if you could, I don't know if you believe that or not, I do. If you could tie your comments about that with the cash flow situation for the system, I would appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I think the notion of the recommendation of the NCHEMS was to criticize us that we were spending a tremendous amount of our strategic and best time, talent, and resources on managing union agreements versus spending our time, talent, and treasure on focusing on the students. And it was an easy thing to slip into. I mean, this state is a closed shop state. There's a long history of organized labor that is a part of the Pennsylvania culture and history. And so I think quite frankly, in this year, we're going to be, this summer, celebrating 35 years as a system. We've had universities, our youngest is 125 years. We've slipped into this culture over time. And it was a wake-up call to say, well, you have agreements and you have to do them. You have rules, statute, laws, history you have to follow. You're too overly engulfed by that, and you're missing the point, and that's the students and higher learning. So I think that, number one, that's the language I took out of there. You're asking also some further questions, I think, around union agreements and funding, if I got that one right. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay, so in terms of union agreements and funding, and I mentioned this when I was a president, and I still believe this way now as chancellor, I have a great deal of respect for agreements and for fairly negotiated contracts. What I've come to appreciate over my now 8 years in higher education in Pennsylvania is there's a structural disconnect between the way in which we arrange these contracts, no matter what they are or no matter who they're with. The way we arrange them and commit to them, and then the disconnect is the way we fund them. A good point right now, this cycle, is I'm very appreciative of the governor indicating in his budget address $15 million for PASHE. I mean, given the tough times that this state is in, that was humbling to see that. Because certainly while we make the case we deserve it, one should never expect it. At the same time, though, we have far in excess of over about $40 million in required additional labor contract increases next year. The math doesn't work. 15 from the state, let's assume we got the 15, 40 in negotiated, rightfully negotiated contract obligations. That's a loser right there. I mean, what does that mean? Do we ask the students for the remaining? Do we cut services and programs? That's the structural problem that we're working on right now. We're engaging the board on it. We're looking at, I can tell you right now, we're looking at what are other states doing. We're going slow, we're being thoughtful. We're going to engage our union partners in this question, but fundamentally we are broken in the way we approach contracting and funding these contracts. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Dr. Whitney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Donatucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today. The theme of today has been job creation and workforce development. When we talk about those things, the goal is broad prosperity shared by everyone. And as policymakers, we have a responsibility to make sure that every Pennsylvanian is getting an opportunity. Underserved populations and non-traditional students are a group we need to reach out to and to help them, and to help improve the financial health of our universities. So what are some of the underserved populations of Pennsylvania that you are trying to reach, whether it's geographical, age, race, gender, ability, income level, or any other characteristics, and what are we doing to reach them?
Representative, I love your question. I mean, if you think about the original purpose of these universities, it was to go across this state and serve the needs of the communities in the Commonwealth. And that has remained a commitment that we have held now going into our third century. But we've also changing. For example, a third of our students come from rural Pennsylvania. 21% of our students are minority students. Over about 40% of our students are first-generation students. Got that right? Just as low as she's all the fact person. So if I do something wrong, because I know all of you all have Google up and you're going to fact check me, right? Okay, so my point is, we are Pennsylvania. We have actually, in the last 10 years, we have increased our minority student enrollment 56%, which is ahead of a lot of other sectors. And we're continuing to do that. So we are here for, and we also have always served women. So we are serving Pennsylvania, and we continue to serve Pennsylvania. We are in our strategic locations geographically, on our expanding online offering of programs. That is a heart of who we are and how we operate. And in fact, many of the students will tell you that, that they like and choose our approach to learning and teaching because it's a sense of comfort and security and support. And we're very proud of that.
Thank you, and that's wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Boback.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Whitney, I serve as the chairman on the subcommittee appropriations education portion of our subcommittees. And in our discussion, we have brought up the system strategic review. So I'll revert back to my colleague and what he had asked, but more specific, one of the recommendations of the review was to restructure those institutions most at risk financially. And specifically in the past, I remember sitting here with your predecessor discussing two of the universities that struggle the most with enrollment and maybe the most financially vulnerable. And of course, they would be Cheney and Mansfield. So my question is, as per the review, what is PASHE doing in executing the recommendations of the report with these financially strapped institutions?
Mm-hmm. One of the things I want to point out is I think we've been looking at some things in a way that hasn't been as well-serving and has actually been distracting. The way I look at our 14 universities is we have universities with larger enrollments and smaller enrollments. But we have an operating model that is about 300 years old. I mean, truly. It's for example, our labor costs usually in organizations are variable costs. With our commitments and the way we've been legislatively required to operate with 90% of our employees in unions, and that's not a disagreement with unions. What it means, though, is you fix work rules. You fix compensation and salary for years. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to change that. So really, when you have smaller enrolled universities, we're not able to currently be flexible enough to fit our operation to the enrollment of the universities. So I think we have an operations problem, not an enrollment problem. For example, and what I want to really tell you, did you know there's 139 colleges and universities, public and private, that offer bachelor's degrees in this state? You probably knew that, right? Did you know Cheney's not the smallest? Cheney's 115.
Wow.
Did you know that Mansfield is 72? Now, I will have to say, because Westchester would want me to, they're number 6. Okay? In fact, 10 of our universities are the top 25 largest in enrollment. So I'll come back to anyone who wants to say enrollment is a proxy for anything. Is it? What is enrollment? Now, I think we need to grow our enrollments because we have a mission. I don't think we have to grow our enrollments to prove some type of worthiness, okay? That's just a fundamental view, and we've been distracting away. How do we, and that's part of the system redesign. We have task groups, I think 9 right now. Several of them are around how can we change the things we can change right now. Where have we not taken stock ourselves of the authority you've already given us to re-engineer our operations to our enrollments? Okay? Then the second thing is we are looking at, are there legislative things that can be done to be helpful? We're still working on that. Right now we're working on what we can do right away versus running here and saying, you fix us. We're fixing ourselves. For example, the board was courageous at the October board meeting of the system board when they set apart 3 priorities for us to unite the 14 universities. Number 1 priority, student success. Number 2 priority is leverage the strengths of all of the universities. Every university has strengths. 3 is transform your approach to governance and leadership. And we've been systematically working on that since that time, well, actually since July. And in piece by piece by piece, and this might not matter to you all, but in our world it's huge. At the January board meeting, you don't know this, but there's like 90 policies that run the system. And it's like plaque. We just kept adding them over and over and over again. Well, they eliminated 11 at the January board meeting. Because now we have a litmus test, and we're going through all our procedures, our regulations, our standards, our reports. There are reports that we fill out that no one looks at. And my view is if it doesn't advance our 3 priorities, let's eliminate it, and then if in fact we miss it, we can put it back. That's what we're working on right now. That's that kind of energy. I met with the presidents this morning. We're talking about how can we create academic programs for tomorrow. How do we use really great, we have an award-winning national database that we use now to understand labor needs of the state in an extremely sophisticated way. And we're taking that kind of data with what our students are interested in, looking at where our alumni are succeeding, and we're working more quickly now than ever to launch those kinds of credentials. That's what's happened as a result of the energy that that system review report generated in July.
And to summarize, because I know my time is of the essence here, I'm watching the red light, but hopefully those programs that you come up with, perhaps in those institutions where they're losing enrollment, or maybe it's the desire of the type of curricula that you will offer them. So I was just curious.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, our schools are not your grandmother's teachers' colleges. Okay? And in fact, we've shifted to meet the needs. 28% of our degrees are now in STEM H, science, technology, engineering, math, and healthcare. Business, 16%, and we still have our heritage programs of education, that's 11%. But you know, back in the day, all we were was education. Right. The state needs us in those three areas, and we're delivering.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Kruger-Brannick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And over here, this side.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it. I've got a two-part question. I'm from Delaware County, the home of Cheney University, which is a very important institution in our county locally. And there was a 2014 Georgetown study that showed that 77% of PASSHE enrollment students identified as white non-Hispanic, compared to 70% of enrollment at private colleges who identified as white non-Hispanic. Now, I think based on the statistic you just gave us, that may have even gone up higher. 79% now of PASSHE students identify as white non-Hispanic. So I want to know, one, what we're doing to improve the diversity at our PASSHE schools, and then knowing that Cheney is a very important institution as an HBCU, what are we doing in particular to make sure that Cheney will continue to be an institution that serves Pennsylvanians?
Yeah, I think in terms of Cheney, we've have a tremendously successful president in Aaron Walton, who joined Cheney this year, who had a distinguished career in healthcare as an executive and also served as a trustee and a Board of Governor member. So he has a deep, deep understanding of operations and challenges. Right now, we're working in three areas with Cheney. One is the finances, the academic program, the enrollment, and quality. And in fact, we got a briefing on that just a couple hours ago on what they're doing. And what's happening is doing an excruciating review of all operations, of all employees. You can't imagine, this is one of the toughest things, is to be fiscally in line. They're going to have to employ fewer people, and at the same time, they're trying to grow enrollment. That is if not almost impossible, it is certainly a delicate task. And they're working through here and understanding exactly what's occurring. Cheney had slipped into some efforts of maybe not being as thoughtful about who they'd enrolled previously. I can tell you this president is committed to building the enrollment and quality and mapping. He has a very clear understanding on the profile of students that will succeed and graduate from Cheney, and that's what we're recruiting to. So it is quite possible that this fall we will report a lower enrollment at Cheney and a higher quality. I'm just letting you know right now. And in my view, that would be a success.
Okay.
The worst thing we can do is recruit somebody who in no way can succeed. That's demoralizing. We always have to have an integrity about who we recruit to any university program, that with their that they have a will and capacity, and that we're able to work with them to be successful. So that is possible. But so we're looking at finances, enrollment, and program.
So can you tell us how you define quality? Because I know in the materials we were given, Cheney was one of the few schools that actually saw enrollment go up recently, and I know that's one of the metrics that at least the General Assembly uses. So if we're looking possibly at declining enrollment to have a higher quality program, What metrics will you be using, and how will you translate back to the
I
legislature?
think those are generally described as high school standing, if it's a direct high school student, and SAT or ACT, college exam. If you're a transfer student, then it would come into your incoming GPA.
Okay.
We use some pretty classic metrics, and we've set in minimum standards across the system. And then, however, additional programs may have additional standards. Like a lot of our professional programs would have even higher standards to enter into that professional program. So it's just holding to those kinds of standards and knowing that on occasion a university might accept somebody who's a .002 off of a GPA because they have shown grit or commitment. But you have to be thoughtful about that. You can't lead with your heart. You have to have a certain disciplined view on admission so that they have a chance of being successful. And I think that any university has to do that. And you understand it's particularly difficult because many people will hold a criticism to a university, again, back to the enrollment. Oh, what's wrong with you? Your enrollment's down. Well, in some cases, that's by a plan. You're introducing higher quality programs, more demanding programs, you're re-engineering programs, you're taking some things away because of the structural problem with the budget. And that's going to affect enrollment.
Thank you. And before the time is up, can you answer what are we doing to increase the diversity if our students are currently 79% white?
Can you check? I do know that we've increased minority student enrollment 56% over 10 years, and the current one is
79%.
79% white.
Reporting white.
Yes. And that's actually higher than the average of other public universities in the state, if I'm not mistaken. I get your point that that's obviously we've got to match and exceed, but I can tell you that number far exceeds the percent of minority students in the Clarion area.
Right, but I don't think it
not
actually
in the
reflects
Philadelphia-
Pennsylvania as a commonwealth.
Well, you're getting me out of my comfort zone on facts. You
Okay.
know better than I do. We can look at that, but I know that given the geographic location of our universities, and given that most of our students, as much as 80%, come within 200 miles, when you track diversity in that way, then we are more diverse than that immediate population. I completely appreciate what you're saying about metropolitan Philadelphia and that sector, and I don't have that off the top of my head in terms of how it relates, but I get your point. We are the Commonwealth's universities, and we must reflect that in who we're teaching and how we're teaching and what we're teaching.
Thanks. And if you've got further information to supply to the committee in
Absolutely.
answering that
We will
question,
get
I'd
that to
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Greiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Madam Secretary. On background, I am from Lancaster County, and part of Thaddeus Stevens College is in my district. Part of what they're doing, they have some expansion going on. And I want to talk about student success. When you look at their school versus schools in the PASHE system, and they emphasize that they nearly place 100% of their students after they graduate, and their starting salaries are in that $40,000 to $60,000 range. And these are family-sustaining jobs. And after last year's hearing, the system provided us, the PASHE system, they provided us some information indicating in their survey that nearly 2/3 of all respondents indicated their 2015 salary, was 2015 information, was $30,000 or more, which of course means 1/3 of those students were making less than $30,000. I just wanted to, just the math. And I just wanted to say, well, I understand, it's all these people have a different definition of success. And I realize that annual income is not the only measure of success. Should it be a concern? And should the state system and universities play any role in directing students or educating them to fields of study that are deemed maybe more in demand by the workforce? And then maybe, which in turn provides a faster return on investment for their students. I know, which goes into the debt too. Thaddeus Stevens, those kids are paying their debt off within a couple of years also. So that's the first question.
Well, yes, sir. I think as you're looking at the rapid growth that we've been seeing in our STEM-H programs, science, technology, engineering, math, and healthcare, health professions, that's where our students are savvy. They're looking at whatever age they're at, because our students range anywhere from 17 to 70. They're most are in that 18 to 22-year-old range, but they are looking at their interests, market. Their parents are certainly looking at it, and I can tell you that's why we've seen a huge increase in students' interest in STEM-H. I will tell you that the salaries of the students who graduate, and for example, I know at IUP just reported to me that in the alumni who most recently graduated, 98% secured employment. So I mean, we do have a high employment rate for our students. They are earning, in fact, let's see here, where's the data on state system graduates' earnings higher on average. Liberal arts graduates earn about $2,000 more on average than their counterparts nationwide. Information technology related graduates, $10,000. That probably goes along with a lot of the Thaddeus Stevens credentials. So they're $10,000 higher, and physics graduates are $3,000 higher. So I think when you're looking at the introduction of new credentials and you're looking at the intersection between student interest and industry demand, we are seeing these higher salaries.
But when these young students are coming to the schools, are you letting them know that if you want a teaching position, then only 20% of you might end up getting a job? Or are you relying on the students and the families to do their own research?
No, sir. Right now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Dr. Carter, who's Shippensburg's president, to talk about what they're doing in the areas of career development, career exploration, what I call good, solid consumer information about the choices you make in major now, what jobs that leads to, and what I call life and livelihood it could lead to. If I could ask her to answer that question, because all our universities spend a lot of time working with students, and then when you consider the large percentage of our students who are first generation, they don't even know the questions to ask. So we're doing a lot of counseling and intervention early on so that they can align their interests in such a way that they really feel that college experience has been very relevant.
I may have to have somebody else follow up because I know my time's soon up. Because I do have something very relevant that I do want to ask you. You gave me statistics, and that was going to be a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
Could you provide us with the updated information on earnings from the PASHE schools? And I like to have the most recent year study, so I like to see that percentage of students who graduated and what their salaries are. If you could please provide us with that report, you could provide it to the chairman because I think all the members of the committee would like to see that data.
You can count on that, sir. We'll get that to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
My
you.
time is just about up, I see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bullock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chancellor. How are you doing today? So we spoke a little bit about Cheney, and as we know, Cheney is arguably, depending on which university you talk to, our Commonwealth's first historically black college and university.
That's my position. So
I
yes.
agree with you. And so one of my questions, I know that we have gone through a lot of challenges with Cheney over the last year and actually have made some changes. In that experience, are there any changes or lessons learned that we can apply to our system statewide that you would recommend?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all learn. I mean, we've been a system for 35 years. Like I said this summer. I think only now are we acting like a system, where we learn from each other. Where we do exchange best practices. Like I said, the presidents aren't here with us today just for this meeting. I hope you don't mind that. We actually have a whole day together into this evening, and we're talking strategically, we're sharing best practices, we're leveraging. President Walton gave us a briefing this morning over all his work, and there is a cross-pollination of best practices going on here because we're all in this together. I mean, obviously, again, smaller enrolled universities have less margin. They have less, that's the only difference, they have less wiggle room than larger enrolled universities. They have more wiggle room. Again, when you get 2/3 of your funding from the student and 1/3 from the state, volume does bring more resources. Now, it brings more expenses, quite frankly, because the money is used to provide goods and services and teaching and learning. So absolutely, President Walton and his leadership team is really leading in some ways that are a tremendous benefit to the whole system.
Thank you. And one other question in regards to Cheney. There's one specific program I know that many people attribute to its success in recent months, and that's the Keystone Honors Program. I understand the governor's proposed budget is flat, and you're requesting a $2 million increase into that program. Could you describe the program a bit and explain why you would like to see an increase in that program?
Well, I mean, it's a focused program that recruits the best and brightest students to, a tremendous HBCU environment, and it provides the supports. Let's be honest, I wish every student could have. It provides counseling and coaching and support and engagement. It provides the, solid financial support to enable them to be there. I wish we were in a world that every student could be in the Keystone Honors Program. But what we're doing is we're strategically looking at that program. The other thing I have to tell you why an honors program is so important, because the group of students in an honors program uplift the classroom. They inspire and ignite their fellow peers. They're often mentors, and they provide tutoring. That interpersonal experience of excellence, it does rub off on the other students. I always used to try to sit next to the smartest kid in class, because it wasn't me, okay? And it does help. It also makes the teachers better. When they know they've got really bright students, they got their A game on. So it is not just about a few students. It's about an entire campus environment.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. I participated in a similar program when I attended Rutgers University, and I do believe that that kind of support to our students, particularly those who may be first-generation students in the university, can help them be successful. And if we want our students to be successful, whether at Cheney or at any of our other universities, we need to support them and invest in them. So thank you for that. I have no further. Oh, one last question, actually. It's a question I asked all agencies, and if you could just send that into the chairman, which is your own reports in regards to your hiring among your staff and across the universities, as well as faculty and staff regarding diversity in hiring and both minority status and women hiring as well.
We can do that. We'll send that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, folks, for being here to testify.
Thank you.
This was brought up before, but I want to make sure everybody heard it the first time. In the strategic review, there's a very startling quote. It says, "The real policy document under which the state system is led and managed is the APSCUF collective bargaining agreement." Now, in the information you gave us in this little packet here, I think it said there's about a 4% pay raise this year, and I think it said the cost was $33.6 million. Your appropriation's only going up $15 million in the governor's budget. But anyways, when you take that cost of $33.6 million, you divide it by the number of students that you have, that's about $353 per student just for the pay raise. Would you favor putting that on student tuition bills just to raise awareness of how expensive the collective bargaining agreement is to the tuition they pay? Is that a yes/no question? But the bill would say tuition, $7,492. Faculty pay raise, $353. Would you favor adding that to the bill so the students could see it?
I get to say yes or no?
Correct.
No.
Okay. Because before, I think you said...
I can explain that if you want, but you wanted yes or no, sir.
We have a five-minute
sir.
clock
I got you.
here.
Okay.
A couple yes/no questions.
Yes, sir.
Does the current contract still require full-time professors to teach 12 hours a week?
It's called a 4-4 teaching load. Most courses are 3 credits, so
it's 12 hours a week.
That's minimum.
Okay. Next question. Does the contract still allow 7% of the professors to be on paid sabbatical leave at any given time? The prior contract did that. Does the new contract do that as well? Yes or no?
There's no change.
Okay, so 7% can be on paid sabbatical, okay?
Up to.
Up to.
Up to.
The prior contract gave 2 pay raises a year to professors. There's a general pay increase and an increment or a step increase for most of the professors. Is that the case in the new contract also?
She's my lifeline. She said yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the prior contract gave free tuition to kids of professors and spouses of professors. Is that still in the new contract?
Yes.
Okay, very, very expensive thing. So would you support efforts to rein in that contract a little bit to help control costs, yes or no?
Does he do this to everybody? Okay.
I do.
And Chancellor, you're not the only one.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This is fun.
I think it's fun. I think it's important. Like our young gentleman that's sitting here, I'll ask him a question. Maybe he'll answer more quickly. Do you realize that $353 of the tuition you paid this year is for the faculty pay raise?
Yes, I'm fully cognizant of that, both as a student and as a board member.
Okay. And are most students okay with that?
I can say that among my peers at my university, there is some concern about the rising cost of tuition. The general understanding of why the increase in tuition is occurring is sometimes not completely there.
Okay. And then something else that was in the strategic review, it says collective bargaining agreements have also enshrined requirements that handicap the ability of institutions to address local issues and to swiftly respond to local opportunities. A salary schedule that is the same for all disciplines and ignores differences across Pennsylvania in prevailing wage and cost of living constraints. I don't have time to read the whole thing, but I guess the question I'm going to ask you is, we have with us today Dr. Walker from Edinburgh University in the back here. We probably have the president from Westchester, I assume. In a place like Edinburgh, the median household income is about $40,000 a year. Right. In Westchester, it's probably $80,000 a year. Would you support a salary schedule by university reflecting their local costs of living? So, for example, the same exact position at Edinburgh would pay less than what that position would pay for at Westchester. Would you support that, given the local institutions more control to adjust things to the cost of living locally?
Representative, you're mentioning some very good practices that exist in higher education and other unions in other states. What I support is a complete review of everything we're doing and how we completely approach our contracting with organized labor. I support an entire review, not just one particular item here right now, because again, we've got something that was crafted well over 35 years ago, and it doesn't reflect modern thinking and modern times toward higher learning. So I want a review. I've talked to our statewide leaders of our unions. We are working through that in our system design. We need a completely different approach. You've mentioned some good practices, and I would say those all need to be discussed in a thoughtful, collaborative way with our union leadership for many, many of the reasons you've suggested. But I'm going to say we have to go further. A complete review and a complete redesign of our approach to how labor and management work together in the system's requirement. I will say, however, that this was orchestrated and constructed beyond the system and beyond the office of the chancellor. This is part of an overall culture and history of Pennsylvania that I would call out. So my question back is, are you ready for us to do this? Is this body ready for us to redesign our fundamental relationships? And are you willing to support and create those incentives for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you answering the questions. I know my time is up, but I would hope that the system would encourage the board to rein in the union contract so you don't bankrupt the whole system. Thank you.
All righty. Representative Kinsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Like my colleague here, I want to give full disclosure. I'm a graduate of Westchester University and currently sit on the Council of Trustees at Westchester. So with that being said, I want to thank Patchy for really taking actions over the past few years that I believe are taking the Patchy system in the right direction, and that is specifically hiring President Ferrantino from interim to the president of Westchester University, along with hiring President Walton for Cheyney University. And I bring it up specifically because over the past 2 budget hearings with the past administration, as we talked about Cheyney University, I asked a question. We had an interim president at the time, and I was told 2 years ago that Patchy was going to hire a permanent president. Mm-hmm. Last year, same question came up, and we still had an interim at the time. So I'm very happy to see that Patchy has moved in the direction of hiring a president, a gentleman who I believe is a visionary individual who's going to lead Cheyney to some greater heights and take them back to, I don't want to say the glory days, but take them to new heights as well. One of the things that the governor has talked about was breaking down silos and using our assets to meet the needs of Pennsylvanians. With that statement, I'm thinking about the relationship between Cheyney University and Westchester. We all recognize that there were some operational problems at Cheney University. Westchester, if I'm not mistaken, is still assisting Cheney. And maybe you can talk about that, the type of assistance that's being offered between Westchester and Cheney University. But also, in addition to that, maybe there are other universities where we can combine some of the, or leverage some of the talents from one university to the other university without the university itself losing its identity and its culture. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, Representative, I can. In fact, you've actually articulated about 3 of the recommendations out of the system review report, and it provides some very insightful language. The language in the report uses the word a consortium approach to our, what I'll call our business operations, and they actually gave guidance on going even further on a consortium approach to our academic enterprise. Let me give you an example. For example, we've been using consortium approaches for a long time. Our health approach to healthcare is a consortium approach. Each university doesn't do its own health contract. It's a system-wide contract, and we save millions of dollars every year in working together as a system. We save it on procurement. We've been doing that for a long time. The idea is, where can we go farther? What more can we do? So this isn't a matter, and I will, because language matters. You know, Westchester is not saving Cheney. Right now, Cheney is hiring Westchester to perform certain goods and services. Okay. That is the way it should be. That's also a consortium of when you look at strengths. Again, the second priority of our system is to leverage the strengths of every university. Every university has strengths. And so we are actually systematically looking at across. Most of the universities have one or more already consortium-type relationships, whether it's a consortium approach on purchase of IT equipment or on common goods that are used throughout the universities. Universities will go through and develop that. Clarion and Edinburgh have procurement agreements that maximize value. That's been going on, and we're continuing to work on that and look at what are barriers to doing even more. Because quite frankly, all our common goods and stuff should be consortium purchases. I think that now what we're going further is looking at business operations and looking at what other contracts we can do. The exciting opportunities from an academic standpoint is looking at what are the strengths of the academics. For example, Cheney has an outstanding hotel and restaurant management program. So where do they leverage that to other universities? Where does a program like at Clarion in nursing, how do they leverage that to other universities? So it's knowing we all have strengths, and how do we create either online platforms or other ways that students can enter into a system-wide marketplace, an academic marketplace, and purchase and acquire credits or certificates or majors or minors in ways that they aren't right now. That's the kind of discussion we're having right now in ways that we can advance and grow within our system.
Great.
Does that help that answer the question?
Yes, it definitely does. And Dr. Whitney, let me just jump quickly to another subject, if I may. We've had some discussion in regards to adult learners. You know, I think that the demographics is changing in regards to the number of students that are leaving high school and going and entering college. But I guess my question to you is, what is PASSHE doing to attract adult learners? And I'm talking maybe individuals 24 years of age and older.
Sure. I think right now we have 20% of all of our undergraduates are transfer students, and many of that would qualify as adult learners, the general definition. And 46% of our undergraduates came from community colleges, of those transfer students. So several things we are doing right now. I mean, we look at our colleagues in the community colleges as preferred partners. And we are continuously looking at how to bring that pathway to make it as seamless as possible for students to matriculate from community college to university. That is something that can't be underscored enough. The other thing that we're doing is realizing that while right now we are in a temporary period, because it's a demographic cycle, much like the stock market these days of highs and lows, We're in a demographic cycle now of declining high school students. But did you know there's 1.4 million people with some college and no degree? 1.4 in this state. That is the current demographic that we should be also paying attention to as we diversify our pipelines from now on, because that's where Pennsylvania needs us. Now, not all of our 14 universities are going to jump in to that 1.4 million, but most will. Again, every university has its own mission and vision, its own strengths, and we're going to leverage that to the adult population.
Dr. Whitney, I want to say thank you very much. I'm excited to have you even though it's interim chancellor, but truly excited to have you. I want to say thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you also for the additional time. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I wanted to recognize, before we move to the next testifier, is recognize that Representative Tobash from Schuylkill County is here as well. He's not a member of the committee, but has showed up to listen to the testimony. With that, I recognize Representative Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we're having full disclosure by the trustees, both Representative Kinsey and James, I will fully disclose that my daughter is a junior at Slippery Rock, and she has provided me with a lovely T-shirt that says "The good, the bad, the ugly, the good being Slippery Rock, the bad being Clarion, and the ugly
We have that
being
same T-shirt at Clarion.
and the ugly being IUP." So I was wondering, Mr. Swat, what does your T-shirt say?
Something along the lines of Slimy Pebble, and
Okay.
reminding that we also won the homecoming football game as well. So,
Did you really? Very good. Where are you from, Mr. Swat?
I'm originally from Scranton area.
Scranton, and you went all the way to IUP.
Yes, yeah.
How did you end up there?
So a little bit of background of myself. I'm a self-finance student, so affordability was at the forefront of my decision-making process, and I was looking for schools that provided a high-quality education, and opportunities within the institution that I could take advantage of was also very important, but the price was the biggest issue right there.
So,
So my cousin went there, and she recommended it, and I fell in love with the campus.
wonderful. And if you had to make a list of IUP, the good, bad, and ugly, what would that be? Not other schools, but at IUP.
I think the opportunities that are there, present for any student, are absolutely invaluable. I would not be where I'm at today without the opportunities that I've had, but also just because of the mentors I've had. And every member of that university is willing to help you. As far as the bad, the precipitation. IUP actually stands for it usually precipitates. But as far as the school, I wouldn't have any specific griefs at the moment. I really enjoy my time at the university.
And when you were deciding on IUP, what other schools were you looking at?
I was looking at Penn State. The attractive words there was the biggest alumni base, but if you compare that to the alumni base for the state system, there's over 750,000 state system alumni, so that's something pretty unique as well. But I was looking at Westchester as another state system school. Like I said, I fell in love with IUP when I visited the campus.
And I can understand that, and I know what my daughter's situation was, and she just fell in love with Slippery Rock. With that being said about the schools competing and competing for students like yourself, I did want to ask Dr. Whitney, the Strategic System Review had made a point about a threat to our state system schools is the competition itself. I believe the wording was unhealthy competition among our institutions where collaboration would better serve students and the state. Can you give us some input on how you're addressing that? Not only competition between the state system schools, but the state system and state-related schools, where it seems like now they're more in direct competition with their satellite schools than they were in the past. Because I know my daughter's choices were between like a satellite school, Penn State, and Slippery Rock.
I can tell you, I took that language to mean we had created a mindset of unhealthy, or what I would even call ruthless competition, when actually we should be looking at leveraging and collaborating. Pennsylvania has an interesting history of having an abundance of private and public and institutions in this state. But the mindset that competition, many people think, oh, competition's good. There's a downside, that it keeps people holding secrets, it keeps a distance. We are not a for-profit retailer. We are the state's system of higher learning. So we are about collaboration and engagement and leveraging our resources, the students as well as the states. And that's what I took that to mean, is that we'd gotten to an unhealthy part. And that's why, for example, the presidents have been very kind. We're meeting more now than ever. We're talking about best practices. We're talking about strengths. We're looking at each other's academic programs. And we're asking ourselves the questions, where's the unmet demand here? We're looking at labor force data. We're looking at the 170,000 jobs that are projected to be open in this state in the next couple of years, and how do we present credentials that fulfill those kinds of demands? And we're doing it in a collaborative way, not in you're a winner and you're a loser.
And if you would, who would you think you are competing with? Are you competing with our state-related schools? Are you competing with our satellite schools? Because understand, we fund them as well.
I have to tell
some
you,
extent.
and I hope you'll find this a satisfactory answer, we're competing not with the 139. We're competing against poverty. We're competing against domestic violence, opioid abuse. We're competing with communities that are so undereducated, particularly in the rural communities here, that we still have women kids who grow up in families where their parents don't want them to go to college. That's what we're competing against. That's our competition, because we are not at the forefront in this country of college-educated citizens. We're pretty much in the middle. So my view is our competition are these larger societal forces, not whether there's a university, closer than I'd like it to be back when I was president of Clarion. So that's the kind of thing. Our point is to be relevant and to provide value. Now, do I wish that in a way we were back in 1983 when the state paid 2/3 of the cost to operate a university and the student paid 1/3? Well, sure. And am I going to make the case that the $73 million increase we've asked for should be funded? Yes. Would I like the state to meet the students 50-50 maybe? Yes. But the competition isn't in these universities. The competition are these larger issues.
And I appreciate that, and I think we'll have a little bit further conversation in the future about that, but we are out
Would
of time.
appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to use my chairman's prerogative here to, we are extremely proud of the Philadelphia Eagles and the world champion Eagles. We're extremely proud of how well Penn State did. But Brian, would you like to tell us how IUP's football team did this year?
Yes, we almost actually made it to the national championship. Unfortunately, we lost the game that was right before the national championship. So we have a very good football team, and definitely commend all the players there.
Thank you, Brian. With that, we'll go to Representative Briggs.
So I always get tough timing. So my questioning was going to be regarding competition and the outside forces. So you answered it much more eloquently than I would have set it up. But I have a senior in high school, and we visited way more colleges than I ever remember visiting when I went to Westchester. I think I went to 2, and I did fall in love with Westchester. But the competition of just the institutions, the facilities that they need, and the pull and how great they all are, and it was private schools and state-related and state-owned schools. But the bottom line is, as Brian said, it's the cost, and we are setting a generation up with huge debt. And if we don't, as policy leaders, don't start addressing that and get it to a 50, I was going to ask you what the ratio should be. Should it be 50-50? Should it be back the 2/3, 3/4 us? That's the direction I would want to go. And I know you're doing more with less, and you're being efficient, and you're cost saving. Every year I ask, give me some examples of what the campuses are doing to save money, and you're doing all those. I don't want to send my daughter to a school that doesn't attract good professors. I want our schools, our state-owned schools, to be just as good as every other school. And if you're going to nickel and dime them and try to say, you're not going to get the same benefits as other schools, we're setting ourselves up for the wrong direction. I love when the questioning you got, we get some questions, we only work 80 days a year. That's bogus. We don't work only 80 days a year. Maybe we should only get paid what our cost of living in our district. Mary Jo and I would like that. We come from a wealthy district, so that would help us. So these are just gotcha type questions that isn't really talking about the future of higher education. I guess I really don't have a question. But if we can do a better job of funding our state-owned school to make tuition more affordable, to try not to strap the next generation, and allow you to compete against schools that are offering a lot more financial aid than your schools are able. So I don't know if you want to add. I mean, it's not a question. My
it's first
frustrating
comment
listening
is to
people.
say amen, and then the second one is to say there is a fundamental relationship between the partnership between the student and the state, and particularly our kind of universities. Our universities are dedicated universities to teaching and learning. Our faculty work 24/7. They work, and you gave a good example here about how a public can misunderstand how hard you're working. I know how hard you're working. I know how hard Lee James works and where he is all the time. I know that our faculty work, it is. How our faculty are working 24/7. They do way more than be in their classes 12 hours a week. They spend 2 to 3 hours a week preparing for every hour in class. They're doing research. They're doing service. They're doing advising and mentoring and being with the students in that experience. And all of you who are alum know that you know faculty that met with you outside of class and what they meant to you. And that's occurring right now, too. The fastest way we can get to better equilibrium is to look over multiple years. This took 35 years to make. To get us to this, we're upside down. The student shouldn't be paying a third, and two-thirds, and the state shouldn't be paying a third. It really ought to be closer to 50-50. We need to get a handle on our approach to organized labor and our contracts so they can be sensible and flexible to allow for stability. What we need now more than anything are institutions that can be in stable operating modes so they then can deliver really relevant college experiences. Relevant meaning that you graduate in a timely way, you have a plan after graduation, and you've prepared yourself for your life. It takes organizational stability. And I can tell you right now where we have passed a line is in disinvestment in our operations and cutting services and programs. It's often really easy to say, well, we'll balance our budget by cutting something. Then you go back as a college president and you look at what do we cut. At the very same time, we are an access institution. We are first-generation students and students who have had overcome a lot to be here. Well, I got to tell you, it's a spoiler alert. They need services and supports. They need programs that cost money, and they're often the ones that get cut first. So we're in a cycle right now we have to break. The NCHEMS report gave great guidance on how to disrupt that cycle, and we're working on that right now.
Thank you. Real quick, did the report mention the 2011 cut? Did it go back to the?
Yes, in the deeper report it did. I was here, I started July 1st, 2010, and experienced that cut in 2011. And in this room in 2011, I sat where Dr. Carter sat and had to talk about what the effects were going to be on Clarion University, and it was worse than I'd predicted.
That's what I meant. President Fiorentino in Westchester is talking to a group of students during that time, and it was something that we were very nervous about. I wasn't on the committee. Chairman Marcosi gave me a sabbatical that term, but it's something that we definitely should revisit, and we should be going in the right direction.
Well, we are going in a steady direction. I appreciate the support that the legislature and the governor has given us over the last several years. It has not made up for that period that you mentioned.
Very good. Go to Representative Delozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here, this side.
Oh, sorry,
over here.
my bad.
I have first a statement, and a lot of my colleagues have hit on a lot of the issues that I think that are important for our higher ed, and I'm going to take a little bit different bent. But first, I did want to make a statement. As a lot of us have kids that are either in the system or going into the system. I have a junior in high school, and I guess I would just encourage any outreach that the system can do on educating a lot of our students on the cost of education and how to find grants, how to look for scholarships, and ways that they can go. FEA, obviously, we just had FEA, and I'm on the FEA board, with most of the bent being we need to find a way to fund education and to have the ability to do that. But that's kind of a statement more than my question. My question would go to the issue of campus safety. We've hit a lot of the issues that are important, but I also believe that our safety on our campuses is paramount. In your description here in your appendix B3, it talks about the fact that State System University has 75% fewer incidents of serious crimes than the state average. Two questions there. What is the average that happens on the state campuses? And B, what do you consider a serious crime?
Our fact checker is going to find the fact because I don't know that off the top of my head. There is a terminology defined by the federal government.
So you use the same. You use that same description.
Terminology.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was a difference.
Would you like to hear from a college president on what we're doing to help students be safe?
Well, I do, and let me follow up. Just also, I definitely want to hear that. My question also comes in the line as to the fact of with the serious crime part of it. You mentioned in the description going forward, the university will need to add victim advocate positions, employ appropriately trained investigators, and conduct campus security. This page has been in this briefing for a number of years, and it still says we need to. So I guess to the response that you may be giving me, why haven't we done it?
Money.
Okay, money, but you're asking for 58 more positions. Are any of these positions in those 58 complement?
No, most of those positions are faculty. No, most of the positions are faculty.
Okay, so it's not a priority then to hire these types of individuals? It's more of a priority? I mean, shouldn't it be balanced out, the campus safety and reaching out to students as well as the faculty needs?
It is a balancing act when you're looking at with resource dollars, where do you put into the faculty and where do you put into these other options to have a balanced portfolio?
And I totally understand that because we all have to balance that
Right.
budget. So, I mean, everybody has that same problem. I guess my issue is that this page has been in here, the budget
Right.
briefing for a number of years, and that line hasn't changed. And so that we need to, and every year there's different complement numbers, there's different.
Right.
So it seems that over the last couple years, this has fallen by the wayside, but yet more and more we hear about the safety of our students and many, that underreported statistics. How are we doing this? Where are those information going? And yet we hear many, many campuses, not necessarily in Pennsylvania, so I'm not throwing you guys under, but across our United States that have very, very big issues with fraternity issues, with alcohol, with all of that lead to very poor decision-making and people getting seriously hurt, if not killed.
What I can tell you that might mislead on is that's a request for state appropriated funds. Many of the universities, in absence of state appropriated funds, use fee funds to fulfill, to hire people and to fulfill the kinds of services and programs you're talking about. So I would have to tell you, don't assume that people are not being hired or retained for the services and programs you've suggested. What we've had to do, given the limited state appropriations, is look to the students to fund those services for the students.
Well, do you have any records as to
Yes.
these positions being
Absolutely.
filled, or?
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm asking for. So
Okay,
can we get that information?
We'll survey that from, it's just not being funded. It used to be. It was one of those, when you go from funding 2/3 of an operation to a third, there's a lot of used to be's. It used to be funded from state money. Now it's being funded by students, or it's not being funded at all. But we will definitely get you a comprehensive description of where we're using all our resources to advance the safety and security of our students. How's that sound?
That would be fine. Your campuses are very different, and I know that some are and some aren't. Can you give me a list of which ones are Act 120 certified for your campus,
Yes, we
please?
can get that. I don't know that, but we can get a list.
Because I know
of
it's
who's
different
act-
on different campuses,
Yes.
which I never quite understood why. Some are Act 120 certified, because you mentioned in your book that they're commissioned, trained, and armed. So all of them carry?
Well, yes, all of them are licensed in the same level. They're all state licensed, officers.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the...
And we also, excuse me, if I may, we also, in addition, a police department may hire other types of auxiliary folks, not just licensed. You may have a security guard. or different
community
people.
kind of
Right. yeah,
service.
There could be in
Okay.
our larger forces a variety of personnel.
Okay, and just the ability, so I would just ask for that information if possible as to where we stand with those changes. And just in the book, it says that we need to be hiring, so I'm inferring that you have yet to hire. So that's why I'm confused as to what you do have and don't have.
Some hiring has occurred as positions become vacated to get reprioritized into some more high priority areas, of which this would be some of those areas.
Okay, and that's why I'm just asking for that information.
We will get that to you. Would you like to hear from a college president
Sure.
about security?
I was just going to recognize Dr. Carter.
Although
Thank you,
I
sir.
was going to say the chairman's going to yell at me if I don't be quiet, so by all means.
Dr. Carter.
Thank you. I would say that we are actually doing things on a daily basis to improve the safety of students on our campuses. And while we have undergone budget cuts and have had to reallocate funds, we are always training our staff, and not just particular staff members, but all of our staff members on how to keep our students safe. In addition to that, we're training students on how to keep themselves safe. Our police on my campus, and I'm sure on all of the other campuses, are very active in the process of training students on how to be safe in and around campus, provide escort services, provide training, both on campus and off campus for students, so that their living and learning communities are safe. So whether we have additional funds or not, we are working every day to make sure that every student on our campuses is safe.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Representative Daley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Whitney, I just have to tell you that I have really enjoyed your testimony. I think your answers have been really enlightening in the challenges you face in heading up this system. So I appreciate your comments. I was going to ask you about older adult education simply because my own path through college was to go get an associate's degree after high school, go work for a few years. and then go back and go to school at night while I was working full-time. So I really value and understand the challenges that that kind of situation can put in front of people, but I also appreciate the rewards and the benefits that it can provide. So I think it's really important to, the focus on that I think is an important one because it's about jobs, but it's also about that broad education that you can get and how important that is. So I have a note here that we value education in Pennsylvania, and I sometimes question how much we actually value Pennsylvania in education when I sit at appropriations hearings. And I do understand that our need is to fund all of the needs of the state in a reasonable, fair way that doesn't overburden the citizens of Pennsylvania. So in just thinking about that and understanding that needs of students and employers change quickly, you've just gone through this strategic study. Are there legislative changes that you would look to us to be making when you're doing a system redesign that would enable PASHE to be more flexible and make your job easier?
Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, I can't underscore, I am having so much fun being chancellor. I mean, these presidents keep me on my toes, and there's 14 councils of trustees, 154 people, and a 20-member board, and they're all number one in my life. So, yeah, okay.
It really shows.
But let me tell you back on how we can help. We are working up a legislative agenda. I apologize, I can't present something right now because we have so many stakeholders. We're processing it. Right now, we're working with the board and the trustees and the presidents on looking at what really matters. I don't want to come in here and waste your time. I want to come in with a few things that can matter the most right now, and then, let's be quite frank, that can really obviously get a lot of support. I'm not here to fight with anybody. I'm here to move the system along. I will tell you, one of the most concrete recommendation in this NCHEM study is something that most recently, a couple weeks ago, Ken Mash, who's president of APSCUF, and I talked about, is the recommendation that we should use we should be able to pursue buyouts and phased retirements. Again, we have a workforce that is a beautiful workforce. The men and women who are the faculty and staff of this system, they have given, many of them, this is their career. Their life's work has been the students at these universities. But the downside is if you're in one area that was really an incredibly hot area 25 years ago and it isn't right now, how do you change that? That's a tough deal. So we lack the tools to engage in a respectful and appropriate way to shift our workforce. We got tools, and most of them are terrible. We need more tools. There's a task group that is labor and management right now looking at phased retirements and buyout. My preliminary briefing is that we are legislatively not authorized to do buyouts. I really believe we need that tool.
Okay.
We're working through the details. We need phased retirements, so that we can work with people in a respectful way on how to graciously complete their career. Those are the things I can tell you right now we're working on, and we can't, and particularly for the buyouts, I hope to get something as a request on that language as soon as possible.
And so are they discussions that you are having with APSCUF?
We're doing that right now.
With APSCUF, are they involved in the discussions?
Yeah, they involve all employees.
Okay.
The potential of buyouts and phased retirements would affect all, but we're going to start there and work through with all of them. But those are the kinds of tools that we need that we don't have, that most other systems like ours with organized labor have in this country, and we don't.
So having worked in a university for 20 years, I know that those initiatives can take time. Do you have a timeline for when you're going to have that agenda
I'm going
ready
to ask
for us?
Ken that when I leave the room.
You're going to, and you'll let us know.
Yeah, I do, because to me, I would love to take it to the next board meeting. We're very enthusiastic. I mean, we have to be thoughtful, right, in what we're doing, because we're working with people
Right.
and their careers. We also, let's be really clear here, the whole point is to shift and shape the workforce to our enrollments, like I mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
So it's not as easy as it sounds, but there is a team working on it, and my hope is, before I leave being a temp this summer, that I can get these items matriculated through.
Well, I wish you the best for the rest of your tenure, and thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing something hopefully soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will move to Representative Helm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, panel. Yeah, turn it on, might help. Currently, I'm talking about tuition rates.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Currently,
ma'am.
the state system has basically a uniform tuition price for Pennsylvania residents. attending one of the Apache schools. Now, I realize if you're an out-of-state student, the price is different. But has there ever been any consideration on the part of Apache board to allow differential pricing among the universities, like maybe with a more popular school or not?
Yes. In fact, we're engaged in that right now. At the most recent January, we've been, institutions by nature need to move thoughtfully. Now, sometimes we're accused of being glacial in our approach to change, but we have to be thoughtful on things like pricing. And for several years now, we did experiment with pilots. Like a university would say, I have an idea on offering a price in a certain way based on a program or criteria. So for several years, we were working through some of the kinds of ideas of variable approaches to pricing. Now we're at a point of maturity that universities are coming into the board, and in fact, at the January board meeting, in the same board meeting, East Stroudsburg introduced a really elegant approach to pricing called the Warrior Promise. It's a guaranteed price on the tuition if students meet certain conditions. The idea if they come in and within 8 semesters, that tuition, now there's fees, there's room and board. I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the tuition, stays the same for 8 semesters. Because they've decided they want to push 8-semester completion of a bachelor's degree. That happened at the same time under President Driscoll's leadership. IUP presented a rate that would be a lower rate for the students who are taking courses at his Punxsutawney campus. So we are engaged right now, and I think we will. In fact, what I will tell you, over time, I believe we will mature not to a one-size-price-fit-for-all, which I think is a mistake, to individual pricing. There will be the SHIP price and the Bloom price and the Kutztown price that links back to their mission, their strategic plan, their academic program, and their purpose. And it'll all line up together, and that's occurring in a very methodical, thoughtful way.
I think that sounds like a good idea because students don't necessarily go close to where they live. Like you gave us this sheet for alumni, and I see that from my area, not necessarily the distance is how they picked a school.
What I'm going to introduce is the concept of regional affordability. This state is a complex state. I mean, if you think about average family incomes by certain counties, there's a 2 to 3 X factor difference between family incomes. We need to be more sensitive in our regional affordability throughout this state, and that's to me the fundamental reason why we have to walk away from a pretty much 1970s view of pricing of one size fits all.
All right. And Dr. Whitney, you also said every university has its strengths, but which universities in the system are the strongest financially and enrollment stability?
Given the fact that 2/3, most of our revenue is in our teaching and learning enterprise, and that the students are paying 2/3 of the cost of operation, the larger universities have the larger enrollments.
So what do you feel their secret to success is?
Location.
Location, really?
I mean, not to besmirch the larger enrolled universities and their leadership and their wonderful faculty, there is some advantage to location. There is also, that's the simplest answer I can give because I've thought about that a lot. I will tell you now that in terms of the leadership we're bringing in, they are entrepreneurial and innovative in trying to figure out how to get beyond that. And again, that's why you're seeing the growth in STEM H credentials and you're seeing growth in business. The other thing is we held on to education too long. I mean, if you're going to look at this as a product line of credentials, the labor market for teachers, now there's a bit of an uptick now, and there's some teacher shortages in certain areas, but quite frankly, it's a crazy labor market.
That it is, but we appreciate what you're doing there and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
With that, I also want to recognize that we've been joined by Representative Carrie Benninghoff, who is the Republican Policy Chairman from Center County. With that, we will move on to the next questioner is Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here on the left. Welcome, Chancellor, and to the leaders and the President, and to Brian, student leader. My name's Madeline Dean. Before I came to the Pennsylvania House, I taught at LaSalle University for 10 years. And so as a teacher, as a mother, now as a grandmother, and now as an appropriator, I look at what we do with education. It is utterly the most important thing we do. How we educate our kids determines our future. We all know that. And so it's frustrating to see the struggle of declining dollars from the state in terms of support over the course of a couple of decades now. We saw a terrible spike, but over the course of a couple of decades, we have sort of passed the buck to you and to the students. So number one, I wanted to ask Brian, if I missed it, I apologize. Very impressed with you. What are you studying and what do you hope to do?
I'm a junior political science and economics major. I hope to be involved actually within the legislative process in some capacity. I really love public policy. There's just something that excites me about it.
Oh, we could use you on this committee. Yeah.
Is there any job offers currently going on?
See Miriam.
Is this the interview?
No, that's very exciting, and it's just terrific to see young people claiming their education. I want to pivot to some of the challenges you mentioned, Chancellor, that you face, whether it's poverty and hunger, the opioid epidemic, and sadly, we talked about violence briefly on campus, but you face extraordinary struggles on campuses with violence. I happen to be a member of the Pennsylvania Commission for Women, and Governor Wolf embraced It's on Us, and so I'm thankful to the schools who have stepped up along with the governor and done more to educate kids. But I think I want to take the chance at this time, following yet another slaughter of students, to speak to the issue of gun violence. You must struggle daily with that. So it occurred to me last week when somebody said to me that, oh yes, we have active shooter drills in our school, the madness of that phrase, the utter inhumanity of that phrase. We ask more of our children, we ask more of our students than we do of gun owners when a 19-year-old can come on to a high school campus and blow people away. What are you faced with? And what are the challenges you have? And how, I'd like from both the student and the administration perspective.
They're going to do most of the time, but I do want to point out, we offer programs in the area of criminal justice, criminality, violence, the general thing you're talking about. We have faculty that I know would want to be part of a solution for this state. So again, what are we good for? We are teaching and learning, and we are about solving problems. So if we can be of any service or support in providing solid policy recommendations that can make a difference, please know that we're available, because we are all citizens of this state, and we have a stake in this. I'm going to let them talk about, maybe start with Dr. Carter on what universities are doing, and then for Brian to comment on his experience. Would that be all right?
That'd be super.
Well, campuses are grappling with this issue, as is everyone in the country. But we're doing it in a balanced way. We respect the constitutional right for folks to bear arms, and we have to balance that with how to have a campus climate where folks feel comfortable and are not living in fear. And we do that through the training that I talked about earlier. So training is a really important part of learning how to be a good citizen in life. And so part of what we do as a university is educate students about how to be a responsible person, both on campus and when they graduate and go off into the world. Educating them about what's going on in the world is also an important part of that piece. On college campuses, very often it's easy for students to get caught up in life on campus and not know what's going on in the world around them. So we're really working hard to make sure that our students understand that knowing what's going on in the world and how to balance that with their goals is important. So education, training, allowing students to understand that this is a time in their life where they are developing into the person they want to be as a responsible citizen is all part of the process for each and every one of us.
To touch on what Dr. Carter said, in addition, I think what is also important is the support and resources available at the university through university counseling that is available for students, and that's completely free at IUPA. I'm sure it is at other state system universities as well. But also, too, the programs and services that alert students if there is anything of danger in the event that hopefully that there isn't, but there's a lot of structures set up in place to ensure student safety at every moment, every day at the universities. As a student personally, I do feel safe. I haven't experienced anything. Hopefully I don't. But yeah, I do feel very well, I do think there is a safe environment on campus.
That's great to hear. And what I want to say is that in addition to additional funding, I think the burden is on us to make sure we adequately fund you so you can provide that safety, that level of education. But also it's on us to legislatively figure out, to solve the problem you're talking about. It would be wonderful if we set up some policy hearings and hear from experts. How can we solve this problem? There are legislative things we could be doing, and we could benefit from the expertise of your faculty.
It would be an honor. That's, again, why you have a state system. We really have a lot of smart people working at these universities that have spent a lifetime in certain specialty areas that can bring really solid evidence-based solutions when asked, and we stand ready.
Thanks for your passion for your work.
Thank you.
Very good. We'll move to Representative Camp.
Good afternoon, Chancellor.
Good afternoon.
Hi. This booklet that you gave us is excellent. Thank you very much. Had a lot of great information in it, including that Chester County, where I come from, has I think we're second in terms of alumni of the state system behind Allegheny County, and second in terms of current enrollees. So I don't know, Pittsburgh's twice as big as us. That's the difference. So my question is about graduation rates. And I see here from some notes we've been given, we now measure graduation rates on 6-year cycles, which is, you know, a change from when I was a kid. But how are we doing on graduation rates?
We look at both 4-year and 6-year, and a lot of that is the swirling. Students make a lot of choices these days on stopping out. I never say drop out unless you've passed away. You've just stopped out, because we always want you to come back. I will tell you that our graduation rate exceeds the national average. Our 4-year graduation rate is 41% of our students graduate, and our 6-year graduation rate is 59%. The national average is right there. Actually, we're at national, well, yeah, is 28%. So the national average for 4-year graduation is 28%. Now,
Have we been kind of steady on that?
Huh?
Have we been kind of steady on that over the last few years? Is that going up?
I don't have the trend. I don't have the trend information. This is for the most recent cohort, which would have been in 2012. I'd have to actually get the chart to know the numbers. But the point I'm making is, on one hand, if I just said 41% graduation rate, oh my God, that's terrible. But when the national average is 28%, I think that puts it in a better context. And then knowing the 6-year rate is 10% higher than the national, that again shows, well, I think there is much to work on. I mean, nationally, we have challenges, which probably are very much the ones we have here in this state. But our universities, our students are graduating at a higher rate at our state system universities. That's the message I want to give you.
Okay, okay. And you talked a good bit about sort of retooling to the new economy. Mm-hmm. And you talked about STEM-H. So is a lot of that, the new degrees, is that in healthcare? And in particular, is that, you know, nursing or allied health?
Yeah, we've had, for example, STEM. It is in the science, technology, engineering, math, and healthcare. The largest jump has been in healthcare.
Okay,
but quite
okay.
frankly, for example, several of our universities within the last 6 years have introduced engineering programs of a variety. They've introduced more in technology. Really, we're tracking and trying to actually get ahead of the workforce needs of labor and industry for this state.
Yeah, and I saw you had this study that you call GAP, right? So, but if you could get me some statistics on in STEM-H, what the breakdown is between engineering and math versus allied health.
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, we can unbundle that, I think, but it really tracks to the national, I mean, the statewide interest, but we can break that down for you.
And I do have one more question. I'm trying to get as much information for the committee as possible. So, reserves, the universities individually or the system, Can you give us some data on reserves, say, this year, and then actually looking back over time?
Yes, we can.
What do you have? Do you have any that you could tell me about right now?
That's just my lifeline, so.
I know, that's okay.
Reserves are a complicated issue. Really, we all have negative reserves due to our long-term long-term liabilities that we all have to carry on our books associated with pensions, health care for retirees, et cetera. But we can provide you more information about our reserves. We'll provide them after the meeting.
Okay, and I mean, of course, you know, school systems have OPEB and everything else, but they also book reserves. Do you have any reserves?
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell me what they are? Give me some order of magnitude while we're here.
It varies by university. We do financial statements for each one of our universities, so it does vary by university.
Okay.
We do look at it in various different methods, but in general, the system does have, when you set aside those long-term liabilities, there are some limited resources available that can be used in the short term to help meet our ongoing obligations for a one-time kind of expenditure.
If you would submit, say, going back 8 years, reserves to the chairman, if that's okay with the chairman, can I ask that?
Be happy to.
Thank you.
Representative Schweier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here, folks. Good afternoon. Wanted to revisit something that we sort of started our conversation with, but put it in a slightly different perspective, and that is the percentage of PASHE schools that are students of color or other minority status. And a question that I had asked at a previous budget hearing last year, and I believe I asked the same question 2 years ago, and to be perfectly candid, I don't think I ever received an answer from PASHE, is a question of your recruitment efforts and your efforts to attract students from more disadvantaged school districts. The reason why I asked that question, I represent one school district. Unlike my colleagues that have multiple, I have one. I represent the Allentown School District. 90% of my students in my school district are children of color. Of the 10% or other, 2 are my kids. But the remainder of them are, in fact, kids of color, predominantly Latino and Hispanic. Yet, my legislative district represents about 75% of the Allentown School District. I have 218 students that are currently enrolled in one of your schools. And now I have the 3rd largest school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 3rd or 4th, depending on enrollment at any given point in time. 90% of my students are kids of color, and yet I have 200 students that are enrolled in your school. I don't know how many of them are, in fact, returning students. So for the 3rd straight year, I'm going to ask the state system again, what are your efforts and what are your recruitment tactics for school districts that have a higher proportion of either disadvantaged students or students of color?
Okay. First of all, I apologize for not following up.
You weren't here.
But that's okay. I'm responsible for everything. So what we'll do is 3rd time's the charm, so we'll get you the data. But I'm going to pass this off to Dr. Carter and say, but I just want to reiterate, we are the state's university, and we have an obligation to work with all of the citizens of this state. I can't tell you how strongly I feel about that. That's why I can tell you 24% of our students are first-generation students. And that ranges anywhere from 18% at Westchester to 31% at Cheney. So, I mean, that's first-generation students. We've got 34% of our students who are degree-seeking are Pell recipients. That's usually a proxy of socioeconomic status of the family. So that's 34%. Again, I mentioned earlier, 21% of our students in the fall of 17 are students who are minorities. And that has continued to increase. And we've had a 56% increase in our minority student enrollments over the last 10 years. So evidently, we're not spending enough time at your school district, and you've got about 12 presidents here that just heard that, so they'll be over there tomorrow, okay? And number 2, though, it is who we are, and yes, we have to do a better job. I'm going to hand it off to the president to talk, because I think your question wasn't just about testing our commitment. It was about what are we doing to ensure that as we recruit, we do a good job.
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I want to start by saying that the recruitment of students from underrepresented communities is different than the recruitment from majority students. And each of us are looking at how we're recruiting students. So when you're talking about African American and Latino students in particular, you're talking about a higher population of low-income students, higher population of first-gen students. That recruitment effort requires not just recruitment of students, but recruitment of families and recruitment of communities. And so we're really looking at how to reach those communities in a way that can be more meaningful. So they understand that higher education has a benefit that is a long-term benefit, not a short-term benefit, that we're not trying to take their child away from the family, that the child can return back home. There are a lot of variables that come into play with those particular populations that require much more time and attention, and we're looking at those issues and how best to serve those populations. So when you look at our campuses, you will look at programs that are specific to the needs of those communities, because those students need to come to our campus and feel as though they're comfortable, feel as though they have a place of their own. And so building a place for those populations is not as simple as saying, come to SHIP. You have to prepare the community, you have to train the community on how to deal with the population so that the students feel welcomed and well received, that families feel that their student is safe there and that culturally they'll be respected and honored. And we're doing that work. We're not doing it perhaps as quickly as we should, but we're certainly changing the way we're looking at we're viewing those communities and approaching them. This is a very important segment of the population for us because we are leaving them behind, and that's not fair.
It's also your growth market.
That's
I mean,
right.
the future generation of your college students are the younger kids that we have in our communities are in fact kids of color.
Right.
So not only is it just morally wrong, it's also really stupid business. And so I appreciate your efforts. And Mr. Chairman, just 1 second. I'm going to finish up my comment now. I appreciate you saying it's taking a while, but every month, every year that it's taking us to build a better infrastructure to recruit folks, you're leaving another generation of kids behind that are making, as we learned, $7.15 or $7.25 an hour minimum wage.
I could not agree more.
It's not good enough. So thank you.
Representative, late breaking news, Kutztown University received a $1.2 million Upward Bound grant for Allentown, plus they're investing $500,000 of their own money. So you will be seeing
I'm pretty
more
good at this
activity.
job. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Boy, that would. Representative Quinn.
Thank you over here, and thank you very much, Chancellor. It is obvious that you've got a passion for PASHE, and you're sharing that with us. And before I go into my questions, I do have to commend the system for your recent hire of Dr. Bashir Hanna from Del Val, right there in my district. We miss him, but we understand that he's serving the greater good there at Bloom.
Thank you.
So I believe I'm going to do a speed round, not quite like my previous colleague there, but we got to get him on speed dating, huh? But I think you answered this question. My concern, as much as I applaud STEM and STEAM-H or STEM-H and STEAM curriculums, I do have concerns in marrying the trend that will be declining enrollment in those majors to collective bargaining agreements. And I'm happy to hear that, if we're looking down the road a few years and we've got, half dozen kids in a class where you still have tenured faculty that you can't, that you have on board, and by virtue of their contracts, they're not going anywhere, where the push is, the jobs are, the encouragement is for the STEM and STEM-H. I'm happy to hear that you are looking ahead to how you balance that with regard to, you said early buyouts or different things. So thank you in advance for giving us tools just to help you better manage that so we don't have empty classrooms, empty online courses, and an abundance somewhere else, yet still have faculty. And I don't know if there's a composite there of redirecting faculty, if that could be starting now to redirecting into some of those others. Is that something that's ongoing?
Well, what the system review report suggests that we're trying to get our arms around now is how to leverage as a system. Let's say if you have one university that has an abundance of faculty in a certain discipline, more than they have students for, okay, because of these quick shifts in demands and interest. And then you have another university that has a need. Well, I'm calling it the academic marketplace. How do we create an academic marketplace? Because I can tell you right now, faculty don't want to teach to an empty room.
And
I mean, let's be really clear, from a credibility and an engagement standpoint, they want classes filled with students. So what we have to try to do is use technology via distance or other innovations to leverage with the current faculty we have to maximize that valuable resource.
I understand that. I respect it. My concern is, assuming each major would be a product, that some of those products will be more obsolete than others in terms of an academic major.
Absolutely. What we do actually, in the time I've been with the system over the last 8 years, we have probably to a factor of 4 or 5 removed more programs than added. We're focusing. We're going from...
What does that do to the faculty who's in there?
Well, that's why you see a lot of conflict.
Okay,
That's
so
why-
you're looking to address that. I'll move to my next
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
It was just something that naturally
Absolutely.
I was thinking
Very
is a
good.
problem. I was checking out your IT and everything that's being done here. Where I see an absence, and you just tell me if I'm looking incorrectly, cybersecurity. I mean, every one of your universities has, I'm sure, is at risk, and it could be even at risk by one of those bright kids sitting in one of the classes. But there's bad guys out there, there's bad gals out there, they're out to get our information. Where am I missing, or is there an investment somewhere in here, university-specific or system-wide, or what?
We address our IT security at a system level. We get, and often we work with vendors and contract out, particularly this high-end specialty, or we do it collectively, and it's done at the system level.
Are you pleased with the level of investment that you're giving for your cybersecurity efforts?
Is anybody pleased? It's something we have held to investments in, and we are using industry best practices. I don't think anybody can feel secure.
I don't, being pleased with the investment and feeling secure are two different things. I don't think we could ever feel secure there. Okay, I'm going to go to the last question since I still have green. I've asked this in previous years, though I wouldn't expect you to be aware of it. As I look at your complement, your head count of 13,188 full-time employees, I see that approximately 65% of those are enrolled in your systems healthcare plan versus the other ones that you mentioned here. In previous budget hearings, I've asked about the process of a dependent benefit audit. We've had one recently done here through the Bipartisan Management Committee. There have been counties in Pennsylvania, states throughout the nation who have done a systematic audit just to ensure that those people receiving the benefits are actually entitled. And what we find so often is the innocent mistake of somebody divorced and you forget, someone had a sudden death, you forget to take them off. And those dollars can add up, especially when you look at the increase that you have the next year. Have you undertaken that? And if not, can you commit to do so?
Yes, we undertake those periodically to ensure, as you were saying, the situation. Yes, we do. And in terms of your notation of that, the employees, it's by bargaining group. The earlier
is that
comment.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't make me feel better that the audit's being done, be it bargaining group or not. I'm happy. Is it done system-wide or from a school or bargaining group?
So it's two different questions. First of all, the healthcare program that our employees are in is dependent upon what bargaining unit they are in. So some belong to the Commonwealth's healthcare programs, and depending on their bargaining unit, others belong to the system's healthcare programs. For the system's healthcare programs, we routinely audit employees and their dependents that are part of those programs to make sure that it's only those that are allowable that are being supported by our healthcare programs.
Thank you. And I will add, I've seen some audits that are very soft, and others actually have you sign an affidavit. The soft ones are
Ours have
really
a sign
soft.
an affidavit. I've certainly done that for my children.
Do not accuse us of being soft. We are not soft.
I get it.
Okay, Representative Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Chancellor. Just a couple questions. The report from the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, I know it's referenced a couple times, I believe, in the information you gave us. Did they give us a series of, I'll say, outcomes or actionable items for us to work on to try and improve enrollment, administration, those kind of things?
They summarize their findings into 9 recommendations, most of which are at the policy level, and give a direction. But in terms of saying, by this date, you should achieve this number, no.
Okay. Have we done anything with that to create a list of items that we want to get done by a certain time with measurable results?
We are in that process. For example, again, the opportunity with this kind of report was to have a tremendous amount of stakeholder discussion after the July board meeting, and that took us to August and September. In October, the board established the 3 priorities I've mentioned that have united the 14 universities.
Okay. Those priorities, do they have, again, what I'm getting to is we probably spent a lot of money for this audit, and I just want to make sure that we spent the money and we're going to put it to useful work in improving either the education. I think that would probably be one thing we do, but also the cost for our students. I don't want to get hung up on that. I guess the answer to that would be is yes, they gave you some things, you've looked at it, and you're working on it.
Yes, sir.
On it.
That's correct.
When do you expect to have that ready?
Well, what we're doing is trying, one of the biggest criticisms we had to work on is being accused of being overly bureaucratic and very rigid. And so instead of telling you that in 2 years we'll be completely fixed, what we've done is we've created a more dynamic environment where we have task groups. We have 9 right now. For example, one of them is on defining student success.
Okay.
That gets to metrics.
So we have tasks. I'm going to try and keep moving because I have a couple other questions. So the answer is you have looked at some things. You're looking at how you can set some milestones to
Yes, sir.
reach. Okay.
Yes, sir. Correct.
The first milestone that you look at, that you're able to meet
is student success, defining it clearly in a way that all 14 universities commit to, and in a way that we can come back and regularly explain to bodies such as yours on how we're doing and what we're doing.
Okay, so it's one that we're going to define ourselves as far as what student success is, that we're all going to agree on.
It's going to be informed by data and best practices throughout higher education, but we're going to take charge of it.
Okay.
And I've just asked for it to be something, when you read it, you get it, and it makes sense.
Okay, and we'll be able to start measuring that later this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. The same report also mentions the income level of many of the first-year students coming into the Pennsylvania state system. And it mentions that there's roughly 30%, almost a third, that are in households that earn less than $48,000 a year. And I know there's been a lot of debate about affordability for education, and it should be a concern for everybody. And I know when we look at what happens and with our appropriation for this year, your request was for a 16% increase over last year, and the governor's is for 3.3%. Are you aware of what the published rate of inflation, or the CPI, was for Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Atlantic City by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as most recently reported in January this year?
About 2%, a little over 2%.
0.8.
0.8?
0.8.
Oh, well, stand
Yeah,
corrected.
so I think our families are going to struggle with that kind. I mean, that's even what the governor's asking for is almost 4 times that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the importance that I see of us measuring outcomes and being sort of trying to keep things in line, because I heard a lot of things here about percentages. Okay, Pennsylvania our appropriation is only this percent, but when our costs are escalating at 4 times the rate of inflation, or we're asking for 4 times the rate of inflation, we could actually be giving more dollars in some cases and it not be as big of a percent. And I think we need to be mindful of that, because our customers, 1/3 of them, are in households that earn less than $48,000 a year. So I guess I would hope that some of our things we're looking at are ways to more efficiently deliver a quality education and reduce some of the costs. Is there some things you're working on there?
There's a continuous improvement approach in higher ed, and efficiency is one of them. What I will point out, though, is my earlier comment around our broken approach to labor contracts, the negotiating and committing to contracts, and then their funding. And it predates me. It predates all of us in this room. It's a history of the state. And until we actually get our arms around the idea of that as a broken situation, because the presidents don't set these labor contracts.
Okay, let me ask this question. Do our labor contracts include performance? Or is there tenure in our labor contracts?
There is actually, higher education has a very sophisticated and deep approach to ensure quality. And I mean,
But is there tenure in the contract?
In the negotiated contract,
Yes.
in the work rules, yeah,
There is.
well, I'd have to go back. There's a lot of language on ensuring quality of instruction and the matriculation of our faculty through the years. Yes, there's a tremendous amount of
Yeah,
information
I would
on
think
that.
we would want to focus on performance rather than somebody just being there longer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. With that, we go to Representative Heffley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chancellor, for your testimony today. One of the things, comment I heard earlier, and I guess it just kind of bugs me. You had mentioned about things that you compete with, and one of them you had said about undereducated folks. And I don't think everybody has to go to a college or four-year degree. I mean, we've heard a lot of testimony yesterday on the need for craftsmen and for laborers and for machinists. I mean, I know kids that come right out of high school with a four-year degree out of a local tech school are making over 40 grand a year. And I know kids that came out of a four-year state school and couldn't find a job. Not to say that that's everybody, but I think each dynamic, and I don't necessarily say that if you have a degree, it means you're overeducated, undereducated. I think folks have their own talents and their own skills, and that was just something that I wanted to bring to your attention. I wouldn't ever look at people just because they don't have a four-year degree as undereducated. They choose to live how they want to live.
If I could, I appreciate the correction because my view is everyone should have a post-secondary credential. It could be a certificate, an associate, a bachelor's. But I mean, if you think about what life will throw at you throughout your lifetime, I don't believe a high school degree is sufficient. And that's what I meant by undereducation. I mean, we've got, by 2026, we're going to have 1.2 million skilled demand for jobs in this state. So I appreciate that you gave me an opportunity to clarify myself because I meant post-secondary learning of all kinds.
And I would still go back that I don't think, I think that apprenticeship programs and stuff like that are great too. But just to go on a little bit, I do want to say my daughter is a senior at Bloomsburg University. She does online courses, and she did a dual enrollment with a community college. And I think this is a wonderful program. And she actually, and my youngest daughter is now taking courses, dual enrollment through the high school with the community college. And I look at the declining enrollment, and I'm wondering, because you've seen more and more students taking these college courses through the community college while they're in high school. It's a significant cost savings. So anybody that's out there watching definitely want to explore that opportunity. And then also with her, with the enrollment that she has through the community college, where she takes classes at the community college and then online courses, and it really fits her schedule. She works full time. She's a senior. She's doing very well. So I would like to see continuing to. I see education really. Evolving to the point where I think the majority of it is going to be online, and I think you're going to have to continue that education because your four-year degree now, heck, by the time you start a four-year, if you're going to a four-year degree right now on iPhones, by the time that 4 years is up, the iPhones are going to probably be eliminated. It'll be something else. So the technology and everything is changing so fast. So I really would, I want to. I would say a good job on the online learning and the dual enrollment programs, working with the community college. I see that as a great opportunity for a lot of young people to get a good quality education and at a much more reasonable rate. And I think folks that are coming out and looking to go to schools and looking to how they can do it and save money should be exploring those opportunities. So thank you.
We have to meet the students where they are and how they need, and I appreciate the examples you've given. More and more of our students, at Clarion, 22% of the students are getting their complete degree online. So we've got leaders on that in Clarion and Cal on online learning, and you're going to see more of it because we're meeting where Pennsylvania wants us to be. So I appreciate the examples that you've given. Thank you.
Very good. We have Representative James who would like to have one more question, so I'm going to recognize him for that, and then we'll move to Chairman Markozik and myself.
Well, thank you, but she just answered the question that Doyle asked, which was the one I was going to ask. Thank you so much, entire panel, for your testimony today. It's been truly enlightening, and you had answers for everything, so it's great. Thanks.
Representative Markozik.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank the panel. Dr. Whitney, if you could bottle that enthusiasm and sell it, you'd make a fortune. And I think it's rubbed off on the others here today. So it's been a great. You've really, I think, handled yourself very well here today. I did not attend Apache School, nor my immediate family, anybody, attended Apache School. But I would be remiss, and I know my colleague who is a graduate of IUP, a fellow chairman, would be also very happy to hear. And I see Dr. Driscoll here today, that I got a call about 4 or 5 years ago that said, Joe, you've been selected as a legislative fellow for IUP University. And I'm not sure what I did legislatively to deserve that. Okay. I certainly am a fellow. I got that part right. But, but anyway, I still remember that. And, that's my big claim to fame as far as the Apache system, other than sitting through endless hearings over the last number of years in my career. But you all do such a great job. You're such a huge asset for our Commonwealth. And I think, we need to make sure and ensure that you survive, and you survive very enthusiastically with our Commonwealth, because you're such an important part of the fabric and the economy, not just the educational benefits that we all get, but you're a big part of our economy as well with all your various locations. So I want to say keep up the good work. I will do, and I'm sure all of the members here on both sides of the aisle will do what we can to ensure that you have the resources to do a very good job in educating our constituents here in Pennsylvania. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Chancellor, I thank you. I think you should reconsider your retirement. I'm a big fan. As you know, I had a chance to interact with you when you were president of Clarion and now, and very proud of the things you've been doing. To Brian, I would say to you, I was very proud of being at IUP, and I was on student government and president of Circle K there, and I actually got elected by the universities in the western part of the state and colleges to head up western part of the state in Circle K. But what I will tell you is IUP gave me those opportunities, and probably why I'm where I'm at today. I was a poor kid, grew up in a farm family, first generation to ever go to college. So most of my college was paid through loans and some grants from FIA, which were very much appreciated, and I paid my loans back.
Thank you.
But I will tell you, Brian, we have a majority leader from Indiana County who went to IUP. We have the chief clerk of the House who is from IUP. So when you're ready to talk jobs, come see me, because we'll see what we can do. We are very proud. There are a lot of members, or I should say not just members, but there are a lot of staff here at the Capitol who are graduates of IUP. So come see me. But I will say, when I was at IUP, and Chancellor, you talked about the labor contract, and I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. Not to pick on Askoff or to pick on the governor or anybody else, but when I was there, professors were required to teach for 16 hours and 8 hours in the office, so that the students had the ability to do that. And I think we heard some of the colleagues talk about the cost of education, and it's not probably just with PASHE, it's all of our universities. The studies have shown nationally the cost of higher ed has risen way above the rate of inflation. We can't continue that and expect that low-income families can afford it. There is never going to be enough money to do the things we need to do if we don't keep salaries in line with the rate of inflation and what the guy and woman who's sending their child to school are making as well. I think being a college professor is a very honorable profession. In fact, I'm not sure if he's retired, but one of my best friends from IUP who went to school with me taught at Shippensburg. I'm not sure, and I won't mention his name, I'll put him on the spot. But it just comes down to the fact is that I think those are things that every governor has to take in consideration. And I think Askoff has to look at changes that need to be made. Because if when you're involved in education, you truly are there because you care about kids and children and the quality of our future generations, you also have to take into consideration what you're doing there as well. You can't just be selfish, that you can't just be there because it pays very well and better benefits than anybody else has. And I say that as a member of the House who has better benefits than most people of this Commonwealth have as well. So I would just say to the future governors and this governor when the next contract comes up, and to ASCA, to really take that in consideration is why are they college professors? Is it because they care about our children, or is it because it's about the pay and the benefits? And that's not besmirching them either. We have some great professors in our system, absolutely no doubt about that. I know when I was at IUP, some fantastic. One of Henry Kissinger's associates was a professor there. So we were very blessed, taught political science class. So with that, I'll just close in saying that I want to thank everybody for coming here today. I did tell President Driscoll we will be having an appropriations meeting at IUP. So we haven't scheduled that yet, but Chairman Markozik's hearing it for the first time. But we are going to do that and have a chance. Maybe, Brian, you can come out before the Appropriations Committee again. But thank you very much. And it is a priority, I think, of every member. Both sides of the aisle here is education. The real concern is, as in today's world, as I ask people of Brian's generation, what do you want the future to look like, and how much do you want taken from your pay? Because I get a lot of complaints from college students about how much they pay in taxes on their part-time jobs. So it is something that at least we have to take in consideration here as elected officials sometimes, is how high do you raise taxes to pay for all the demands that we have today? And it's a difficult decision, as you all well know. So again, thank you very much and appreciate your time, Chancellor. And again, if I don't get a chance to see you before you do retire, I wish you all the best. Like I said, I'd love to see you recommit yourself to being Chancellor again. It would be the smartest thing this Board of Trustees did. But also, I guess in closing, I didn't want to forget to mention that I really hope the Board of Trustees has the courage, and it's going to take courage, to deal with Cheney and Mansfield. Because if we don't deal with those two universities, what needs to be fixed, we will have other universities in the same situation. Because I know there's some other ones in the system that are struggling at this time as well. And I'm a real believer in PASHE. But if we fail to deal with those two situations, I can see where Westchester or IUP or whatever becomes private universities. And we have a demand here because some people say, why give PASHE any more money? Put it into FIA. You know, so there's a lot of competition for education dollars today. And that's what I think our ASCA, I think the college presidents and the Board of Trustees have to understand. When it comes to higher ed, it's not just PASHE, it's FIA, the private universities, our community colleges, and our trade schools in the state who are post-secondary education. The demand for education dollars is tremendous. And I'm a real believer in education as the former chairman of the House Education Committee. But we have to find a way to make all of that successful. So thank you. Brian, thank you for the courage to come before us. And President Carter, you've been rather quiet, but I'm glad at least you got a chance to talk a little bit. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Mr.
And this
Chairman.
hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.